Okay, this is the beginning of chapter 6. This is the all-rounders. The title of your book is Uppers, Downers, All-Arounders. We've talked about the uppers, we've talked about the downers, and now we're going to talk about the all-arounders. This is kind of a fun chapter. This is where we tackle marijuana, but we also tackle all the other really weird drugs. Psychedelics alter a user's perceptions, whereby reason becomes unimportant, and intensified sensations create illusions, delusions, and hallucinations. Psychedelic fungi and plants have been used by humans since the Neanderthal times. Now the reality is that we do have Neanderthal ancestry. If we don't live in, and they have actually done research looking at the DNA of individuals living in Africa. There are a lot of Africans that do have Neanderthal ancestry. We all have Neanderthal ancestry. We don't look like Neanderthals, but the reality is that we may have as much as 17% of our DNA is Neanderthal. It really all depends on who you are, where you are, and where your family has wandered since leaving Africa. People that live in Spain and people that live in France, people that are ancestors of those two groups of individuals, they tend to have more Neanderthal ancestry than other groups. Asians have Neanderthal ancestry. American Indians, of course, have Neanderthal ancestry. Just about everybody that is not living in Africa has a relatively high percentage. Depending on how you look at high percentages. Amanita mushrooms have been used in India for 4,000 years. Belladonna has been used since ancient times in Greece. Marijuana was snorted in ancient China. LSD in the form of rye fungus ergot was consumed in Renaissance Europe. Psychedelics are readily used today in several forms and have waxed and waned in their popularity over the years. What did I read about? Somebody overdosed on MDMA. Oh, this lady took a sip of wine and there was MDMA in the wine and it killed her. She died. She died a couple days later, but she said the wine tasted funny, and so she only took a single sip. But there's MDMA in the wine and it killed her. MDMA, 2.3% of high school seniors used it in 2000. By 2003, MDMA was down to 1.3%. So it became popular, and then all of a sudden it wasn't nearly as popular anymore. A lot of this has to do with the music that you listen to. If you listen to the wrong music, then the music tells you that you need to roll a blunt on a bar in Los Angeles. So people that go to Los Angeles and they go to the bars, they think that they can roll a blunt in the bars. The reality is, of course, that you can't smoke inside a building in California, despite the fact that they have legalized marijuana now. They have legalized marijuana, but the common usage of marijuana in California has been truncated. LSD, 4% of high school seniors used it in 1995. By 2006, the percentage was down to 0.6. Marijuana, 37.4% of high school seniors used it in 1979. When people find out that I'm old, and that I've been around for a long time, they assume that I went through that era where a lot of people were smoking pot. The reality is, in 1979, I wasn't even in the United States. I was in Europe. I was in the United States Air Force, and I was stationed in Germany. So while all the high school seniors were smoking so much dope, not only was I not in high school, but I was in the military testing people for drugs. So you can take that to the bank, I guess. By 1992, the number of high school seniors who were smoking marijuana was down to 11.9% had been cut in by a third. By 1999, it had risen to 23.9%. By 2006, the percentage had gone down to 18.3%. Marijuana is used the most among whites. Marijuana is used the least among blacks. Hispanic use is somewhere between these two groups. Psychedelics come in 5 chemical configurations. LSD and psilocybin mushrooms are indoles. Peyote and MDMA are phenylalkylamines. Belladonna and datura are anticholinergics. Marijuana is a cannabinoid. Those in a class by themselves are ketamine, PCP, salvia divinorum, and dextromethorphan. Dextromethorphan is the cough medicine stuff. Dextromethorphan. The effects of psychedelics is determined by toxicity of the substance, the amount used, the user's experience with the drug, the emotional makeup of the user, the mood and the mental state at the time of use, the pre-existing mental illnesses, the surroundings in which the drug is taken. Most hallucinogens stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, which results in rise in pulse and blood pressure, sweating, palpitations, nausea. Psychedelics interfere with select neurotransmitters. They interfere with dopamine, of course, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, anandamide, of course, this is the one that is affected by marijuana, glutamate, alpha-cytosine, but especially serotonin. The psychedelics really increase the amount of serotonin in your system, especially MDMA and LSD. Psychedelics greatly affect mood because serotonin is amply represented in the limbic system. Stimulation in the reticular formation in the brainstem tends to overload the sensory pathways, making the user acutely aware of all sensations, which is really kind of interesting because they're concentrating on the palm of their hand, or they're really interested about the hair follicles coming out of their knuckles or whatever. Overstimulation of the visual and auditory centers may cause auditory stimulation to jump to the visual pathway so that music might be seen and sights such as colors may be heard. And this, of course, this crossover of sensations is referred to as synesthesia. Some individuals have this naturally. They are synesthetic. They have all these strange crossovers taking place. And a lot of these individuals become artists of one ilk or another. But of course, when you take these drugs, you may have a synesthetic reaction. An illusion is a mistaken perception of an external stimuli. LSD and most psychedelics cause people to have illusions. A delusion is a mistaken idea or belief that cannot be swayed by reason or other contradictory evidence. LSD and most psychedelics also cause delusions. A hallucination is a sensory experience that does not come from external stimuli, but is perceived as coming from an external stimuli. Mescaline, psilocybin, and PCP cause hallucinations, cause people to have hallucinations. Seeing things that aren't there, hearing things that aren't really there. LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, ibogaine, morning glory seeds, dimethyltryptamine, foxy, AMT, and ayahuasca are the indole psychedelics. These substances create mental interactions by inhabiting the serotonin receptor sites, especially the 5-HT2A site. This affects your sleep, your mood, your anxiety level, and it can form hallucinations and illusions. LSD, or lysergic acid diethylmide, is also known as the sacrament, as acid. Of course, that's fairly common to call it acid. Blotter, barrels, orange sunshine, illusion, and window panes. Window pane is LSD that's made with rat poison. The reason they put rat poison in it is so that it gets into your system faster. When you drop acid, when you drop LSD, It can sometimes take an hour for the stuff to take effect. But if you use window pane, which is mixed with rat poison, it'll get into your system almost right away. LSD is the semi-synthetic chemical compound found in the ergot fungus, found in some cereal grains, but especially in rye. This substance was first isolated from the ergot fungus in 1938, and it was synthesized. LSD failed as a psychological enhancement substance in psychotherapy and as a treatment for alcoholism. But, if we look at history, we can see that there have been select individuals who were treated with LSD and it actually worked. Cary Grant, for example, back in the 1950s, they used LSD treatment on him and it cured his depression. There's another lady that just recently, for some reason, she took 550 times the normal dosage of LSD and it cured her depression. So there are, with these hallucinogens, there are, MDMA is another one that they have used recently for individuals who aren't responding to other treatments for depression. They're treating them with these mega doses of the psychedelics, and it's actually helping them. And of course, this is something that we're going to have to be dealing with in the future. Just because you use LSD doesn't mean that positive things are going to happen, but just because you are treated with LSD doesn't mean that negative things are going to happen. So we're dealing with two different ideas. One of the ideas is that it's an illegal drug that people are using to get high, and the other one is that people who are depressed are using, and they're not responding to other medications. These select individuals, of course, are being cured by these mega doses of the psychedelics. This is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. This is something that we're going to have to think about. It's not a done deal. And I don't know if these were select individuals. They have a different brain chemistry. That's why it helped. We don't have any trials out there that look at how many people were helped and how many people weren't helped. This is just something that has happened in the recent past. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it. It was, so the LSD was purchased by the CIA. This is in the 1940s. It was purchased from Switzerland. The individual was a Swiss chemist, and the CIA bought it. They were thinking that they could use it as either a truth drug or they could use it to control masses of people by spraying them with LSD, and of course that would, then they would have control over them. The program that was called MK Ultra, and it was an abysmal failure. Some of the individuals that they gave heavy doses of LSD to became psychotic. Most of the individuals did not have a positive reaction to it. And for that reason, it of course failed. One of the CIA's researchers was the Harvard professor Timothy Leary. He was a psychologist. Leary discovered that psychedelic properties by accident. LSD is really kind of interesting. It doesn't take very much of it to start affecting the individual. What he did, he splashed it in his eye. He splashed a little bit of LSD in his eye, and an hour later he took a trip. And of course it was so psychedelic and so mind expanding that Leary decided that he needed to give this to the rest of the world. And that's where that's where LSD came from. LSD came out of the 1950s and 1960s. Leary decided he was going to take the chemical and give it to the rest of the world. And it entered the counterculture movement in the United States. What was going on in the United States at the time, this is in the 50s and 60s, Vietnam War started in 1963. The civil rights movement had started back in the 50s. In earnest, it had started in the 50s. So there was a lot of counterculture stuff taking place in the United States. LSD seemed to fuel that, especially in the middle to late 60s during the anti-war movement. So there's a lot of interesting things taking place. LSD was made illegal in 1966. It had no function. It had helped Cary Grant, but at that time, of course, he wasn't advertising the fact that LSD had cured him of his problem. LSD is easily manufactured, though it has mostly come from the San Francisco Bay Area of Northern California. It takes a very small amount of LSD to produce a reaction, as I said before. The entire United States uses less than 11 pounds of LSD in any given year. The chemical is usually dissolved in alcohol and placed on blotter paper for consumption. 10 to 50 micrograms are the usual dosage on the blotter paper. 10 to 50 micrograms is not very much. This is a really, really tiny dosage. And for this reason, since I worked in the laboratory doing drug analysis on individuals that we were trying to determine if they were using drugs, this is way too small an amount to even detect. The only way that we could detect it was in an autopsy. So if somebody died, we could check their cerebrospinal fluid for LSD. It's the only way we could do it. So it's not like we could check every GI for LSD. It just didn't work that way. The levels were way, way too small. And of course, we were mass testing people, and we needed quick and rapid, and accurate levels that were relatively cheap. The federal government does not like to spend money, LSD was not something that we could check for. The popularity of LSD has waxed and waned. It was popular in the 1960s and 1970s as hippie drugs to get in touch with yourself. The drug became less popular in the 1980s, but made it a comeback as a rave drug or supplement to ecstasy in the 1990s. A drug raid in Kansas virtually took the drug off the street and made it too expensive for ravers to afford, and this was in the 1990s. Its popularity today is with the same rave crowd for people who want to experience a high. LSD is used in such small amounts that it is not normally detected by standard drug testing, as I said before. And the standard drug testing that we were doing, of course, was on moss. We were testing thousands of GIs every year. And LSD was not something that we even tried to detect. It was just way, way too small. LSD is remarkably potent, creating a reaction with 25 per 1/1,000,000th of a gram. 25 1/1,000,000th of a gram. This is really, really tiny. It causes spaciness, decreased perception of time, creates a mild euphoria. You can have a good trip or a bad trip. Usually the euphoria is not very strong. Its effects appear 15 to 60 minutes after ingestion, so it takes a while for it to get into your system. The effects peak at 2 to 4 hours. The effects last 6 to 8 hours. So this is really kind of dangerous. You should not be dropping acid by yourself. And this is one of the problems that we had when people started dropping LSD, when they started using LSD. We had people that committed suicide. And it was usually suicide by mistake. They thought that they could fly, so they went up to the top of a building and jumped off. These are the euphoric feelings that you were given. They walked out in front of a car, not realizing that it was a moving vehicle. These kinds of things. We referred to it as suicide by mistake. And for this reason, it became common for people to drop acid with somebody else. You weren't supposed to trip alone. Withdrawal from LSD is more a mental state than a physical dependence. They may experience a downer at this stage, and of course, they don't return to normal for half a day, for 10 to 12 hours. Fatal dosage, of course, heroin is very strong, and it can kill you relatively readily. Nutmeg, datura, isobutyl nitrite, GHB, all of these things, as you can see, they can kill you, lethal dosage. With MDMA, cocaine, alcohol, dextromethorphan, rohypnol, this is roofies. GHB is also a date rape drug. It knocks people out. As you can see, people very rarely overdose on psilocybin, LSD, and marijuana. It's very, we've never seen a case of, well, actually we have. There was a mother and father who were smoking marijuana in a motel room, and they smoked a lot of it, and their baby developed they had the baby in the room, of course, and the baby developed a respiratory reaction to the marijuana, and it died. So there's, the baby's lungs were pretty small. The baby was relatively young. It was only a couple weeks old. And of course, mom and dad did something stupid, and now the baby has died. LSD effects include rise in blood pressure and heart rate, rise in body temperature. You're not going to overdose on marijuana, especially if you're an adult. This is just something, people will have an allergic reaction to it, and that's the only reason that they die. They're also not going to die from LSD overdose. And of course, you can't overdose on psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms. LSD and psilocybin are the two drugs that they have been talking about using pharmaceutically to treat depression that people that isn't reacting to normal medication. And you can see some of the things that will kill you. Heroin, of course, arrests your brain stem, and you stop breathing. Nutmeg, who would have thought nutmeg is fairly poisonous. Is this where I am? Yeah. So what happens with LSD? How does it affect you? It raises your blood pressure and heart rate. It raises your body temperature. You become dizzy, and for this reason, most people trip laying down. They don't move around when they're on LSD. Dilated pupils, sweating, after-image light trails known as trailing phenomena, sensory distortions. You see sounds, you feel smells, you hear colors. Dreaminess, depersonalization, altered mood, impaired concentration, and motivation. So while you're under LSD, of course, while you're under the influence of LSD, there's not a whole lot that is, you can't detect what's happening around you. And for this reason, the United States military thought that they could spray it on enemy troops, and then they could just go in and capture them. They wouldn't be doing any fighting because they would be tripping, and all of these things would be taking place. So they couldn't defend themselves. And that was the idea. They're going to spray this stuff. They're going to spray this stuff on an enemy force, and that unit would become non-functional. Didn't work. MK Ultra did not work. LSD activates the locus coeruleus, which causes the release of extra amounts of norepinephrine. The extra norepinephrine enhances alertness, causing the illusions of heightened awareness and introspection. LSD trippers often will lose their ability to express themselves verbally, which seems to be happening to me right this second. So let me take a drink. Fascinating stuff. In the emergency room, we used to get these guys because things weren't happening the way they wanted them to happen. They were having a bad trip. They couldn't talk. And of course this scared them. They thought they were having a stroke. So they had somebody brought them into the emergency room. This is usually, they were having illusions and hallucinations. And because of that, of course, they thought that they were becoming schizophrenic, which is something that can actually happen to you when you're on LSD. But usually that's the reason we got them in the emergency room. The greatest danger is the impaired reasoning that the individual displays in the loss of judgment, and this is when they jump off of buildings, they step in front of cars. That has happened as well. Usually if they jump off a building, it kills them. But sometimes they stay alive, and of course then they get to come into the emergency room and we get to try to figure out what the hell's going on. The user can suffer acute anxiety reactions to LSD known as bad trips. This is especially common for new users who aren't aware of the intensity of the euphoria or the possibility of panic that can be induced by the drug. They feel depersonalized, they feel like they're not themselves, they have acute anxiety, sometimes they have paranoia. This can be a danger as well, because if these individuals are armed, they suddenly become dangerous. We had an incident where a young man was holed up in his house. This is in Oklahoma. He had just bought himself a Chinese assault rifle, along with 1,000 rounds of ammunition. And for some reason he dropped acid. He was sure that the Chinese were coming to get their gun back. So he loaded up his weapon and started shooting through his wall. Eventually he shot out the whole front of his house. By this time, of course, the police had arrived. He's still shooting through the walls. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know who he was. They tried to call him on the telephone. He thought that they were the Chinese. A real strange story. Eventually, of course, he ran out of ammunition. He had shot all 1,000 rounds. By that time, he had blown open his front door. He'd shot out all of his front windows. The wall was partially gone in the front of his house. He had actually shot the whole front of the house away. And at that point, of course, when he ran out of ammunition, the police came in. After a time, they figured out that he had run out of ammunition. They went in, they captured him, and the first thing they did, of course, was to take him into the clinic. And of course, I was working at the clinic at the time. And we had this long, interesting conversation where he would speak, and he would leave out every second and third word. So he would say, and it was like all of these sentences were written for him. So he's saying every the first word, the fourth word, the seventh word. You know, it was really kind of strange. So here we are, we're trying to piece all this stuff together. He's not making a whole lot of sense. But eventually we figured out what was going on. He thought it was a code that he was using to communicate with the people who were not Chinese. It was just really bizarre. Anyway, he got really paranoid. He thought they were coming back to get their weapon. Fear of loss of control, and of course he did lose control. Delusions of persecution, and of course he thought that the Chinese were coming to get his gun. So he was sure that the police were part of the Chinese mafia or something. I don't know. He had weird ideas that people get. Delusions of persecution, feelings of grandeur. Suicide by mistake is not uncommon. As I said before, these individuals feel like they're on top of the world, that they can't be hurt, that vehicles are not solid, you know, all kinds of really strange things. Sometimes they'll jump in the water and drown. It's just really weird. LSD can be dangerous for people with pre-existing mental conditions or mental instability. These are not the people, if you already are schizophrenic or you have a depression, this is not the stuff that you really want to take. They are, the people that have been treated with it are being treated in clinical settings. But if you are somebody that's depressed, and you know you're holed up in your dorm room, this is not the time to be taking LSD. You should never ever take LSD alone. Using LSD can aggravate the already existing conditions leading to more severe mental disturbances. Use of LSD has also led to experiencing their mental illnesses at a younger age. LSD can lead to relapse for an individual recovering from a psychotic episode or major depression. Individuals without mental illnesses might be thrown into temporary but prolonged psychotic reactions or severe depression that requires treatment. Some individuals have been known to experience prolonged trips that can be emotionally crippling and last for years. So they are tripping for years. Hallucinogen persisting perception disorder is re-experiencing mental flashbacks or sensations from a previous trip. This is something that they used to warn people about back in the 60s and 70s when people started taking LSD. All of a sudden they hadn't dropped any acid for an extended length of time. All of a sudden they would have flashbacks and they would start experiencing the trip again. It is usually from a bad trip. Usually the flashbacks are from a bad trip, not from a good trip. If it were from a good trip and you were, bouncing along with bunnies, that wouldn't be so bad. Nobody would be complaining about that. But usually it's a bad trip. HPPD can occur months or even years after the last use of LSD. The flashbacks recreate the original experience and can be triggered by stress, use of another psychoactive substance, and exercise. Now, when we talk about HPPD and we're talking about LSD here, the other psychoactive substance that they're referring to is not more LSD, it's not PCP, it's not any of the stronger drugs. They're really talking about marijuana. Marijuana has hallucinogenic properties, and this is a psychoactive substance that can create a flashback. So when the person is in stress, when the person is smoking dope, when they are exercising, sometimes they will have one of these LSD flashbacks. HPPD seems to have a strong hereditary component and results in anxiety and panic, of course, the fear of having another episode. Some people suffer from long-term intermittent or continuous HPPD where their flashbacks occur on a chronic basis. This type of HPPD can resolve itself in 5 years or persist indefinitely, resulting in difficulty reading, memory problems, color confusion, halos around objects, which is really kind of strange. So they will say, dude, you've got an aura about you. My aura is always yellow. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Probably not something that's not very good. But when I've talked to these individuals, they say that I have a yellow aura. Visual after images, they see trails, they have intensified colors, macropsia and micropsia, objects appearing abnormally large or small, as weird as that sounds. Illusions of movement, geometric pseudo-hallucinations, flashes of color, imagined images, floaters in the eye. Floaters have to do with solid material in your eyes. Evidently, people that take LSD, it crystallizes the aqueous humor in your eye to some extent, to a minor extent. And these individuals tend to have more floaters in their eyes. And of course, every time they see these floaters, they think that they're tripping. HPPD can be caused by other psychedelics besides LSD, though it is most common with LSD, MDMA, MDA, mescaline, DMT, PCP, marijuana, or psilocybin can also cause HPPD. Flashbacks occur in from 23 to 64% of regular LSD users. We can treat this with Zoloft, clonidine, naltrexone, have been used successfully to treat HPPD. LSD does not produce compulsive drug-seeking behavior, thus it is not considered addictive. Tolerance develops rapidly, and some users have reported as many as 500 trips in their lifetime. The dependence is probably psychological instead of physical. There are 75 different varieties of mushrooms that contain the active ingredients psilocybin and psilocin. They grow in Mexico, the United States, South America, Southeast Asia, and Europe, and have been used since before recorded history. They are especially important to the Aztecs and the Toltec religions in Mexico and Central America. They were, of course, the Aztecs and the Toltecs don't exist anymore. These substances are still being used among Mazatec, Cole, Lacandan, and Mayan shamans. And when I was in Guatemala, we ran into some Mayan shamans who actually were using the magic mushrooms at the time. Really kind of interesting. When we were in Guatemala, we weren't in Guatemala City, we were in some of the surrounding villages around Guatemala. They hold church on Sunday nights, or Sundays. They have Mass on Sundays, and they have church gatherings on Wednesday nights. When they are not gathering, when they don't have a Catholic service at the churches, the shamans use the churches for their, they come into the village and they will do their, whatever they're going to do. They will do them on Tuesday nights and Wednesday and Mondays and Fridays and Thursdays and Saturday nights. Then they clean the place up for the Catholic Church, or the Catholics to do whatever they're going to do. But it's really kind of interesting that they use the same facility for the shamans as religious services. The chemical structure of psilocybin is very similar to LSD. However, mushrooms vary widely in strength, with some having as much as 10 times the level of psilocybin as weak ones. So you may be using magic mushrooms, they may be strong, they may be weak. You really never know. You can't really tell until you use them. Fresh mushrooms are more potent than dried mushrooms. Psilocybin is broken down into psilocin in the stomach. Psilocybin is twice as potent as psilocin and crosses the blood-brain barrier more readily. Psychic effects begin at dosages of 30 to 60 micrograms. The effects last for 3 to 6 hours, and the effects are nausea and other physical responses before the psychedelic effects begin. So a lot of times these individuals will get sick. They, of course, feel sick, and sometimes they will throw the stuff up, and that will be it. The whole game's over with. Altered states of consciousness, changes in sight, hearing, taste, and touch. They will have visceral effects, and sometimes this has to do with vomiting. Less dissociation and panic than with LSD. So there isn't the same paranoia with magic mushrooms that there is with LSD. Many of the psychedelic effects are caused by the disruption of neurotransmitters. Dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine oversensitizes the senses, of course, and that is one of the reasons why you have a reaction. Some of the people try to harvest their own magic mushrooms, but the similarity between mushrooms that contain psilocybin and those that are poisonous make picking them way too dangerous. You have to be a trained individual in order to understand what's going on. Ibogaine comes from the African shrub Tabernanthe iboga. At low doses, the substance acts as a stimulant. At higher doses, the substance produces a long-acting psychedelic-like catatonic reaction that can last up to 2 days. Okay, what is a catatonic reaction? It's where you sit there and don't move. Okay, and this can last for up to 2 days. Ibogaine is used by the Witi tribe of Gabon to remain motionless while hunting. These hunters also claim to have ancestral visions while under the drug spell. This drug has been considered as a treatment for heroin, alcohol, and cocaine addiction, as it reduces withdrawal symptoms. And of course, anytime you can reduce the withdrawal symptoms of alcohol, you're much better off. However, neurotoxicity has been observed with its use in this capacity. So probably not the best idea in the world to use it for withdrawal symptoms. Morning glory seeds contain lysergic acid amide, which can be used to make lysergic acid diethylmide. Lysergic acid amide has 1/10 the potency of LSD. It requires several hundred morning glory seeds to get an effect, and this usually causes a great deal of nausea because there are toxins in morning glory seeds. To exacerbate this effect, the seeds that are sold commercially are dipped in a toxin and induces vomiting. But of course, the seeds themselves, I mean, if you're putting hundreds of morning glory seeds in your mouth, we're not talking about sunflower seeds here, we're talking about morning glory seeds, which are relatively bitter. And it is the bitterness that is the toxin. That's what you're tasting. So in order for you to get high, you're going to have to throw up. As much fun as that is. Not only that, but if you buy bags of morning glory seeds and try to use them, you know, take that paper package and rip the top off and down the morning glory seeds, they put another toxin in them, and you're just going to vomit anyway. The effects of morning glory seeds include sensory disturbances and mood changes, nausea and vomiting, again, because of all the toxins that are in the seeds. Most seeds have renin in them. Renin, of course, is a toxin, and the reason it's there is so that things won't eat it. If we had little animals eating all these seeds, we wouldn't have any plants. So the seeds have poisons in them, and poisons are necessary to keep the seeds intact so that they can grow. Where are we? Oh, we're still on morning glory seeds. Okay. Anyway, nausea, vomiting, drowsiness, headache, and chills. This sounds like the flu. I'm not sure how you feel about this. Just in order to get take a little bit of a trip, you're going to make yourself feel like you've got the flu. Makes a lot of sense to me. Dimethyltryptamine, DMT, was first synthesized in 1931 and is found in several South American trees, vines, shrubs, and mushrooms. The psychedelic substance in DMT is similar in structure to psilocin and is usually smoked, snorted, or injected, as it is deactivated by stomach acids, and it causes visual hallucinations, loss of awareness, and the individual's loss of awareness of where you are. The high lasts for 10 to 60 minutes. Similar response comes from the venom of the Sonoran desert toad as DMT. So, how in the world do you get the venom of the Sonoran desert toad? Well, this guy exudes it out of his skin. Sonoran Desert, which is just south of here, you can wander around in the desert and lick toads if you like, and of course, potentially you will have a psychedelic reaction to toad licking, but I wouldn't suggest doing that. I don't know if that sounds appetizing to you to go around licking toads, but, well, you know, some people are a little strange. Foxy and AMT are two psychedelic tryptamines. These drugs aren't very popular, but they have been found in raves in California, Arizona, Florida, and New York, where some interesting people live. The effects of tryptamines are similar to other rave drugs. It gives you a feeling of euphoria. You feel empathetic toward the people around you. Visual and auditory disturbances. Formication, where it makes you feel like you've got bugs crawling out of your skin, which is always fun. Formication is what causes people who are using crystal meth to itch and to scratch to the point where they create abscesses on their skin. The reason this happens is because the hair follicles stick up. And when the hair follicles stick up, of course, they're very easily stimulated. And for that reason, a lot of people who are using crystal meth, who are using methamphetamines, they'll shave all the hair off their body so that they will not have this reaction, this formication. It's really quite irritating. Anyway. Paranoia, emotional distress, nausea and vomiting, and diarrhea. It sounds like a good time. The effects from small doses will last 3 to 6 hours, and heavier doses will last for 12 to 24 hours. Good luck with that vomiting and diarrhea. Ayahuasca, or yage, is a psychedelic drink made from the bark, leaves, and the vines of a plant in the Amazon jungle. This drink causes intense vomiting and diarrhea before it deposits the drinker in a dreamlike state for about 10 hours. Select tribes of natives in Peru, Brazil, and Ecuador use the drug for divination, prophecy, sorcery, and medicinal purposes. Cults have sprung up in Brazil around the use of this substance, ayahuasca. The active ingredient is indole alkaloid harmaline. This group of psychedelics, the phenylalkylamine psychedelics, are related to adrenaline and amphetamines, though their effects tend to last much longer. The best known phenylalkylamine psychedelic is peyote or mescaline. Mescaline is the active ingredient in peyote cactus and the San Pedro cactus. The use of these cacti for religious insight and rituals dates back 4,000 to 5,000 years among the native tribes of Mexico, Central and South America. In North America, 50 tribal groups are still using the drug for religious purposes into the 21st century. In 1996, the Supreme Court ruled that peyote usage by the Native American Church of North America was protected by the Constitution. And of course, there was a peyote ceremony last weekend, I think. I saw that the teepee was out. I think that was on Friday, maybe Friday and Saturday. That's what peyote buttons look like. Mescaline is found in the small gray-green crowns of the peyote cactus. They can be used dried or fresh. The buttons can either be eaten or boiled in a tea. The mescaline is bitter and nauseating. It can take as many as 7 to 8 buttons to elicit a response. The effects last up to 12 hours and results in colorful visions and hallucinations. MDA and MDMA, ecstasy, the rave drugs, were first synthesized in 1910. And strangely enough, they were first synthesized in the United States. These drugs have a similar chemical structure to mescaline. These drugs produce the effects, feelings of well-being, euphoria, and psychedelic stimulatory effects. MDA was popular as the love drug. This is in the 60s and 70s, as it was supposed to increase your libido. And it didn't quite work that way. It was later found to destroy serotonin-producing neurons in the brain, along with a few overdose deaths, and actually it became less popular after the people died. But it destroys your serotonin-producing cells in your brain. Whoops. MDMA or ecstasy was developed to produce the same effect as MDA with fewer side effects. MDMA lasts for 4 to 6 hours compared to 10 to 12 hours for MDA. It is popular as a rave drug as it is reputed to make the individual dance and interact with other people at the party. The drug was tested for psychological impact by the United States Army in the 1950s. Once again, we were going to use it on enemy troops, but instead was touted as a drug that would help therapists tap into emotions and memories of repressed patients. It was used in this capacity in the late 70s and early 80s. The drug was found to create empathy in its user. The street vendors changed the emotion empathy to ecstasy to improve the sales. And of course, marketing. People taking MDMA experience intensified senses of smell, which makes the use of strong-smelling substances like Vicks inhalers and Tiger Balm popular at raves. Okay, so you've got people sticking these Vicks inhalers up their nose, putting Tiger Balm on, if you've ever seen or used Tiger Balm. It's really, really strong stuff. They use it to warm their muscles. It's for athletes, of course. Glow sticks are waved in front of ecstasy users to create a mesmerizing effect. MDMA tablets cost pirate manufacturers from 50 cents to $2 to make, but they sell for as much as $10 to $70, depending on the market, of course. DEA reports that 30 to 50% of MDMA sold isn't MDMA at all. So, you know, let the buyer beware, I guess. The effects of MDMA are similar to amphetamines that begin to appear about 30 minutes after ingestion. Increased heart rate and respiration, excess energy, fainting, sweating, chills, hyperactivity, tightening of muscles, especially jaw muscles, and the clenching of teeth. And for this reason, a lot of individuals who are using MDMA suck on baby pacifiers. And sometimes they will eat lollipops. This, of course, is so that they'll not clench their teeth and break their teeth off, or grind their teeth and wear their teeth down. Infrequent use leads to heightened responses. Heavier use leads to rapid tolerance of MDMA. So it's not something you can use every weekend. That wouldn't work. You would very rapidly develop a tolerance to it. Overuse of MDMA may result in dehydration that may result in water toxicity and electrolyte imbalance, pupil dilation, blurred vision, and eyelid twitching, headaches, agitation, nausea, and anorexia because you're not eating, serotonergic axon apoptosis, resulting in thought and memory impairment, rapid and potentially dangerous heart rhythm problems, seizure activity, stroke, cardiovascular failure, and coma. Malignant hyperthermia that can result in muscle damage, renal failure, or even blood coagulation. Malignant hyperthermia means that your body temperature goes up very, very high. For this reason, if raves are usually done either at night or in a refrigerated warehouse, they keep the temperature in the 50 to 60 range so that the people will not suffer from hyperthermia. The individuals at raves it is suggested to them that they go out, they drink as much water as they possibly can, and if they are feeling like they're going to pass out, that they find somebody who can take them outside. This is really dangerous. People die. People, renal failure, muscle damage, blood coagulation. My God. No blood. 20 to 60 minutes after ingesting MDMA and lasting for 3 to 4 hours, the drug changes the feelings of the user. They feel happiness. They feel happy. They feel this really strange clarity that everything is understandable. They feel peace, they feel pleasure, altered sensory perceptions without depersonalization or detachment from the environment, non-sexual empathy for others. Some people call it the love drug. Some people say that when you're on MDMA, of course you want to have sex with like everybody, but the reality is it raises your serotonin level. And what do we know about serotonin? People that take Zoloft, Prozac, sometimes they are impotent, and the reason they're impotent is because they are increasing their serotonin level. In your brain, serotonin controls your sex drive. So the more serotonin you have in your system, the less likely you are to have sex. So this whole idea that this is a love drug is the opposite of the truth. These individuals cannot have sex, so it's a non-sexual empathy for others. They do a lot of hugging because they feel so much empathy for everybody. Self-awareness, of course, heightened self-esteem, open-mindedness, acceptance, and intimacy. And the intimacy, of course, isn't sexual intimacy, it is physical intimacy. MDMA's psychic effects are probably produced by its overstimulation of serotonergic producing neurons in the brain. Of course, as I said before, serotonin is the neurotransmitter that controls testosterone in your brain. Testosterone is your sex drive in your hypothalamus, actually. So if there's too much serotonin in the area, then sex is not going to happen. MDMA forces the discharge of the reservoir of serotonin into the synaptic clefts. If more MDMA is taken when the effects begin to wear off, the response is a reduced reaction. Serotonin receptors may retreat into their cell membranes to avoid damage, and this is known as downregulation. It may take up to a week to regenerate enough serotonin to produce the same effect. In other words, if you overstimulate this whole thing, then you're going to kill your serotonin-producing cells in your body, and you'll have fewer serotonin receptor sites anyway. So while you're using MDMA, you're having this amazing reaction with all this serotonin, and your neurons are going, oh my God, this is way too much stimulation. I've got to downregulate my serotonin receptors, and that's exactly what happens. So you're having a great time at the rave, and then when the rave is over with and you go home and you burn off all of your MDMA, so how are you feeling now? Well, you've just downregulated all of your serotonin receptor sites, so you don't have nearly as many in your brain. So while you were very empathetic to everybody while you were on MDMA, now that you're not on it anymore and it's burned out of your system, it has been processed out of your system, it's metabolized out of your system by your liver. Now what's happening? Well, you've downregulated all those serotonin receptor sites, so now you're depressed. Congratulations, you've just chemically induced yourself to be depressed. Because of the downregulation of serotonin receptors, tolerance to the drug is fairly rapid. After use, MDMA users may experience extreme depression and suicidal thoughts. There's a shock for you. Because of the questionable content of tablets said to be MDMA, polydrug use is common. LSD is taken with MDMA to increase the time the MDMA effects last. This is known as candy flipping, flip-flopping, XNLs, and candy snaps, as weird as that sounds. MDMA with hydrocodone, OxyContin, codeine, heroin can enhance the euphoric feelings of both drugs. GHB with MDMA, a form of modern-day speedballing. Nitrous oxide in MDMA intensifies the inhalant rush. Prozac and MDMA, nitrous oxide is used, that's laughing gas. Prozac and MDMA are used together to buffer the serotonergic cells from toxicity. MDMA and Viagra are taken together to enhance sexuality and is referred to as sextasy. So while you're increasing your serotonin, you take the Viagra so that, the male is taking the Viagra so that he can actually have an erection, and of course it's known as sextasy. MDMA has been maintained because of its popularity with people who attend raves, dance parties, and electronic dance clubs. Rave and club music is also known as techno and maintains a trance-like beat that may be accompanied by light shows and laser light effects. Remember, they were using those glow sticks to mesmerize people that are on MDMA. These events are usually accompanied with the use of many illegal drugs that includes MDMA, nitrous oxide, GHB or GBL, this is the date rape drug, dextromethorphan, which is in cough syrup, ketamine, which is also a date rape drug, PCP, Nexus, any street drugs other than alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant. Problems at raves usually come from other drug use, alcohol, methamphetamine, LSD, GHB, or ketamine. Remember, GHB makes you forget whatever happened to you. Ketamine is the same situation. You can't remember what happened. MDMA effects that can cause problems are usually in the form of overheating, falling injuries, passing out, bad psychedelic experiences, and mental destabilization. Two drugs that are popular as rave drugs in the Netherlands are 2CT7 and 2CT2, also known as Blue Mystic, Tripstasy, Seventh Heaven, 7-Up, Lucky 7, and Beautiful. The drugs are psychostimulants and cause the following effects. It induces delirium, heightened sensitivity, increased awareness, nausea and vomiting, and dangerous cardiovascular responses. A lot of these things are deadly. Raves are very, very popular in Europe. We had a student, when I was teaching at Mississippi University for women, we had a student from Switzerland. Really interesting lady, very, very attractive young lady. The weird part was that, and she spoke English very well, because she's Swiss, and the Swiss speak French, German, Italian, and English are the 4 languages that they speak in Switzerland. Real interesting. She was a raver. Really nice lady. I never saw her smile. The entire time, I had her in 2 different classes, and I never saw the lady smile, not once. And she claimed that she was an ecstasy user, and she claimed that ecstasy was the most wonderful substance in the world. And I always thought, well, if it's so wonderful, why aren't you smiling when you talk about it? The reality was that she'd used so much ecstasy that she had lost her ability to be happy. Her serotonin level, potentially, of course, and we don't know for sure. The only way we could tell would be in an autopsy, and of course she was still alive, so we weren't going to be cutting into her brain. But I never saw her smile the whole time she was there. Uh-oh. Nexus is a trade name of 2CB or 4-bromo-2,5-dimethyoxyphenylethylamine. It creates mild stimulation at low doses and intense psychedelic experiences at high doses. This is an amphetamine-like chemical. STP is the street drug for that chemical structure. It's also known as DOM, serenity, tranquility, and peace. It is similar to MDA as it produces a 12-hour intoxication that results in intense stimulation, mild psychedelic reactions. It is notorious for producing bad trips, so be careful. PMA or 4-MA is the street name for paramethioxyamphetamine. Its stimulant effect only lasts for about an hour, and it leaves the user with sudden rise in blood pressure, distinct after images, pins and needles tingling, feeling like a chill or a person's hair standing on end, seizures, hyperthermia, coagulation of blood, and muscle damage. Sounds like something to stay away from. Bromo dragonfly is also known as bee fly and fly. It is a powerful hallucinogen that has a longer duration than any other hallucinogen, sometimes lasting for days. It produces hallucinations, delusions, and memory loss. Belladonna is a small plant found throughout the world that has been used for eons by women wanting to make their eyes more striking. It dilates your pupils. It's the most bizarre thing in the world. When somebody, let's say that you're looking into the eyes of your significant other, the reason that you know that they are in love with you or that they are attracted to you is because that their eyes will dilate. So it's somebody with dilated eyes, it looks like they are in love with you if they are looking at you or if you're looking at them. Most people, it doesn't really register that their eyes are dilated. They're not thinking when they're looking at somebody, ooh, I wonder if her eyes are dilated. Does she really like me? What normally happens is you're talking to a bunch of people, you talk to this person and with no effect, you talk to another person with no effect, then all of a sudden you talk to another person and she seems to be looking into your eye. I'm a male, so this is what I'm talking about. So this young lady looks into your eyes, and all of a sudden, of course, her eyes dilate. She's looking at you theoretically or seemingly longingly, you think that she is in love with you, as bizarre as that may seem. Okay, so if we can dilate our pupils naturally we can give this effect, then potentially we can fool somebody into thinking that they're in love with us, or that we're in love with them. Belladonna is Italian for beautiful woman. Bella means beautiful, donna means woman. Belladonna blocks acetylcholine receptors in the central nervous system to produce delirium, inability to focus the eyes, tachycardia, which is an increase in heart rate, intense thirst, hyperthermia to the point of death, hallucinations, separation from reality, and sleep for up to 48 hours. Why don't we stop right here, and we'll pick this up next time. I'm on 50 of 100. So I'm right in the middle of the chapter. What happens next? Wait a second. No, it's Jimison. We're talking about Jimison weed next. Okay, we're going to stop right here. And I'll see you guys after break. Have a good break and have a safe break. Don't do anything that I wouldn't do. Of course, I'm kind of boring, so that's just about everything. So good luck. Have fun.